We are live, just as Ruth's about to cough. Good morning, everybody. Ruth, would you like to cough?
No, I've held it in.
Good morning. Welcome to live TV. It is true, it is honest, it is real life. Good morning, everybody. Really, really nice to be back. I feel like I haven't been here for a really long time, but it's been a month since we were all here as Be Career Confident on LinkedIn Live. So great to be back. Ruth, lovely to see you as ever, sending you a big virtual hug. And we're also joined by the wonderful David, Kelham and Stuart Cooper from Wagstaff, the Wagstaff team. So, Stu, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so obviously Stuart Cooper, been with Wagstaff for 10 years this week, wasn't it? So
yes.
10 years in recruitment. A variety of roles before that of engineering, that man, been in sales. So obviously, might touch on it later, but obviously transferable skills have gone across a variety of roles there, but last 10 years has been engineering recruitment.
Very good, thank you. David, lovely to see you.
Hello there, nice to be back. David Kelham, I run the business school Accelerate Resources, and we focus on executive recruitment in food, drink and hospitality. I've been doing that 20 years now, can you believe it? And I'd worked in the trade for 20 years before that, with a little touch of the military with the Royal Navy beginning. So transferable skills, certainly I can allude to those, both soft and hard skills.
Fantastic. Very lovely to see you. So great to have many of you who've been part of the Be Career Confident family since the beginning. But for those of you who haven't, Be Career Confident was set up March 2020, Ruth, just after the pandemic started. It was an opportunity. Ruth and I have known each other for a very long time as recruitment partners, as training and coaching partners. And we've always wanted to have a collaboration platform and a collaboration project where we could offer careers coaching support to a wider audience, whether that's an individual, whether that's a parent, whether that's a student, whether that's a business, you name it. So that little tiny window where the sun shone for those 2 weeks, as soon as we went into our first lockdown, we went, right, we have our opportunity, let's do it. So we've come together, we have a wonderful team of associates who are either trained recruiters, HR professionals, you name it, who offer this remote support under the Be Career Confident. So delighted that Stu and David are Be Career Confident associates, so fantastic to be back. We felt today with the market as the market is, in this crazy world, there's so many discussions and conversations around skills. Is there a skills shortage? Is there a skills gap? How do we deal with the issues of skills? What do we do if we want to change industry? What do we do if we want to change job? Do we invest in ourselves and upskill? There's so many questions around this skill split. So, as always, in response to where we feel there's a need, we've decided to respond. So today we're going to be talking about skills. We're going to be talking about what we need now, what we can use later, a whole range of things, aren't we, folks?
Yes,
we are.
I felt like I was cool then. Yes, Mrs. Sykes, we are.
Good. So Ruth, let's talk about individuals for a minute, shall we? Because I know, with recruitment hat on for a minute, I'm not going to be the only person on the panel who's had the question on multiple occasions throughout our careers, but most recently, extensively over the last 2 years, of people saying, you know, what do I do if I need to change industry? What are my transferable skills? How do I find them? How do I identify them? So Ruth, let's go into that a bit further, shall we? Okay. Let's investigate kind of what that means. How do we encourage people to identify what their skills are in the first place? Because that's probably the first step, isn't it? Before we start talking about do we need to upskill or do we need to change, we need to say, right, well, who are we now, don't we?
Yeah, and I think it can be very overwhelming. And we've experienced this a lot over the times that we've all been in recruitment and done career support, but I specifically have noticed it over the past 2 years because there's been this big shift of people have asked themselves a lot of questions. And that could be that suddenly we've come out of a pandemic and people are wanting their home life to fit their work life a little bit better. or they're feeling that they want to do something different because, for some of us, it could have been, gosh, life now feels a little bit more precious and we need to do the things that we wanted to do. And I'm not that 100% happy in my job now. But how do I change it? And you're right, Charlotte, it's a really big question. And I also think that depending on where you are within your career, confidence has a lot to come into it. First of all, of what do I want to do? What do I think I can do? And how do I identify if I can shift? Now, for me, the biggest thing of being able to identify it is asking the people that are closest to you, because they're the people that see how great you are and what your skills are. So to identify where you're great and share those ideas, for me, that's the first thing. That's with friends, with partners, with family, with colleagues, people that you trust. I fancy doing this, but I'm not sure. I think getting other people's opinions is the first step for me. Would you agree?
Actually, I can't remember who it was. It was earlier on a previous crowdcast, and actually one of the things, I think we were talking about confidence, and it was in kind of finding direction. And actually, sometimes when we're in that soupy world of not knowing what direction and who we are, it's because we're too close. We're looking at ourselves like this. So that external point of going, I'm really stuck. Can you just, any friend, any family member, anyone will humour us enough to give us one word to say, you are good at this or you are good at that. And ask a few people, and yes, absolutely, you can pick that skill. Stu, you talked about it for you. And just briefly, when you in that 2-second intro that you did about yourself, you talked about your changing skill.
Yeah.
And how you've identified that. Can you remember how you worked through that change and how you identified, right, well, I'm good at this, so I think I can move into that? Or potentially with Ruth at your side back then 10 years ago, maybe Ruth helped you decide it, but
I think, well, I'm sort of, 45 this year, I think it is. So when I go back to a sort of, I say a child, sort of early teens, when you are sort of then thinking about where do I want to go. I remember being very practical. I remember Ruth knows is taking the lawnmower apart, the old push along, taking it apart, respraying it, putting it back together, and laying slabs in the garden. I was always very hands-on. So I always knew it was going to be a practical route. And I think that the younger that you are, and Dave just started the soft skills, the hard skills, the transferable. The younger that you are, you're not going to have so much of the hard skills. You've got the personality. You might have had a part-time job, but you are those soft skills first. But you might have an inkling of, am I theoretical or do I want to go practical? Or which route? And I always knew it was going to be practical. So I mean, I did an apprenticeship at MG Rover. So I went into engineering because I thought, well, I want to use my hands. I want to get into engineering. I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to go that route rather than I want to be an accountant. So I'd always got a bit of an inkling. I mean, luckily at the time as well, my mum was a careers advisor for school. So I had a bit of guidance, and she had said, what about an apprenticeship? Oh, okay, well, what does that do? What does that mean? So I've got a bit of information, but obviously these people are in school. So there's people that you can ask that like you say, your parents can offer that advice of, well, I think you're practical. I think you're theoretical. Do you want to go to university or go and do an apprenticeship? Or there's careers coaches or careers advisors, and there's small tests that you can do to sort of push you down that route. But yeah, at my core, I knew it was practical and hands-on, and I wanted to go down that path.
Yeah.
Interestingly, so when Stu joined Wagstaff, Stu's CV was on a job board, and I was looking for somebody to partner with me. And a lot of our clients are within the engineering and manufacturing world, and I'm not an engineer. And I thought, right, the best compliment is I understand recruitment. If I've got somebody who is very good with people but is an engineer, that's going to really complement our business. But interestingly, so I reached out to Stu because I'd seen his CV, and Stu had moved from the engineering, you'd then gone into account management and sales orientated types of roles, hadn't you?
Yes, exactly.
with big companies, and his CV said account manager. I was like, oh, that's what I need to support me. So I reached out to him and said, have you ever thought about a career in recruitment? So at what point he said, no.
Well, no. Why would I want to do that?
Why would I want to do that? And so I think when we talk about identifying people's skills, especially in a company environment, and even people see what you don't see. So I had already seen, and it was just from a CV at that point, we hadn't met, was actually this person understands engineering, is very customer focused, and that's what I need. But he had, because Stu's perception of recruiters was very, very different to the job that I wanted him to come on, and that he did. So I think that's a really interesting point of, like, when identifying your skills, people see in you what you don't sometimes see in yourself.
Yeah, credit to Stuart's employers there, though, because taking somebody from the hands-on role to an account management role in itself is a tricky move to make. So clearly there was attributes that somebody recognized in your previous employers that helped that happen.
Yeah.
So what I think is quite interesting, actually, you've touched on it there, is you talked a bit about starting your career, and Stu, this the session is not 45 minutes of self-evaluating and critical, I promise, but it's a really, really good story. Because, and I'm using you as an example, you said, I'd always been practical, I'd had those skills, and there was a comment there about the soft skills and the technical skills. And you said, when you're younger, you don't necessarily have all of those technical skills, but you have the soft skills. So just for a minute, let's think as individuals, and that kind of how we evolve, how we improve. So we've kind of talked about how we would potentially identify it and how we would use others to help us when we're stuck to struggle to identify. When we're in a confident place, it's easy to identify our own skills, isn't it? We can sit down and we've got that clarity to say, this is what I'm good at. But if we then talk about improvement, everybody defaults, don't they, to say, oh, right, well, I must go on a training course, or I must sign up for this new thing and go back and do my IT skills again, or I must, we automatically default to those technical skills. But actually, David, I'd like to chew this one over with you and say, well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that if you don't have the communication skill, and if you don't have the people skills, and if you don't have the manners and that basic level of soft skill to start with, don't bother doing the other stuff. Then actually, at any point in our life, and let's discuss if you agree or don't agree, but at any point in our life, it's really important to remember both, isn't it? To actually say, hang on a minute, particularly during COVID, hands up if you feel that you needed work on your communication skills during COVID, because
yes, indeed.
Really not volunteering you, but let's go together.
No, I've already gone. I was there. Yeah. Gosh.
Going back
David,
into a
what's your
face-to-face.
thought?
Well, yesterday is quite. I'm just thinking about that. I went on a speed networking session at a very large secondary school near me, Mighton School, and what did we have? We had 2 hours of 5-minute sessions. So a lot of young people came and sat in front of me, and you could really tell the ones who had already, through experiences had with part-time jobs in hospitality, or clearly who had done a bit of sport and had some confidence from that, or a bit of drama or public speaking, sat down, and you could feel they were looking you in the eye. There was a smile, there was engagement. There was some really very bright sixth formers sitting down who couldn't look me in the eye, just really felt embarrassed, very uncomfortable being in front of a stranger. The communication with somebody outside of their family group clearly had very much suffered during COVID. They just did not have that confidence or that awareness of how they were coming across to even get past first base. And as we all know, trying to put somebody like that in front of a client It almost doesn't matter how strong their hard skills are, what their academic record is. It's not going to happen. So it really is at that early stage encouraging teachers, parents, and the individuals to think about, all right, I may not want to go and read that lesson in church, or I may not want to go and meet all those other odd people at Scouts, but if they can be persuaded to do it, it puts
No
that
judgment on Scouts, by the way, just like a disclaimer. No judgment on Scouts.
Sports club, whatever, just any environment where they're put out of their comfort zone, out of their bedrooms and their video games. It's hard, but those are the things that really make as much difference as sort of getting them in the classroom and getting their homework submitted on time.
So I think the challenge actually, and we are targeting that comment to youngsters, but I think I'd like to challenge all of us as adults, as professionals, as parents, whatever it is, to actually maybe switch the bias, do we, Ruth, to say, whenever we then need to thinking about our skills and how we might upskill, is just to check in with our soft skills first, shall we? Ruth, what's your thought? Because I know, Ruth and I, obviously, everybody, we work together, we are there, we do that peer-to-peer mentoring because that's part of a friendship, that's part of a business relationship, to actually say, I'm struggling to communicate, or I'm finding this hard, and maybe we have a responsibility to other people when they're at that transitionary period, just to say, right, where's your confidence, where are your communication? Ruth,
I think it's hard. Yeah, but I think it's hard to get to that point. I certainly, 12 years later of having the business, I'm in a totally different place. That I haven't got a problem now of picking up the phone to trusted peers and say, I'm struggling. I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. And just because I know I've built up relationships with people who I trust their opinion and I trust their confidence. That takes time to get there. And I think and we'll get there at different points, and different things will happen in our lives that we'll have built relationships with trusted people that maybe they haven't worked out as well, and we have to start again. And so I'm going to steal what Charlotte and David were talking about yesterday, because it comes into it, which is, this is all about the foundations. This is all about you building your foundations as an individual and finding out what you need in your environment that's right for you. So, because whatever's good for me might not be right for somebody else. And that's why I make the point about, there might be some people listening to this and say, well, it sounds really like you guys have got it sus. You'll pick up the phone and say, well, how are you doing? Or you'll be very open to be able to say, I'm struggling with this. There is a lot of people that it takes a time to get there and to build those relationships. And I think, David, to come back to your point about when we start off, especially at the start of our career, is to work on those core skills of how we can communicate well, how we can be comfortable in our communication style, and build some trusted relationships with people that can be your framework, can be your solid foundation. And it will change and it will evolve as we get older. I'm sure with all of us, we've got people that we rely on from years ago, and then we've got people that we've met more recently who can add a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think the ongoing thing about networking and meeting people, I mean, David, I think that's brilliant that school are doing that, because I'm certainly 20, 30-year-old me was nervous about going in and networking with people, and not exactly the bit I enjoy the most at the best times. And
I think people enjoy it less so after COVID. And I don't think that's unique. So I think particularly for these kids, and I've heard it on multiple occasions, is what's happened. How the youngsters have reacted to COVID is a inflated version of what everybody else has. It's more visible.
Yeah, I spoke to quite a few candidates who said, I've been working from home for the last 2 years and I don't like it. I want to be back in an office. I want to speak to people. And it's not so much the job, it's just people around them to communicate. That's the time of day, isn't it, than just sitting there and they feel they've got a bit more introvert because they've just sat at home especially if it's a data entry role where they don't need to speak to people. They're isolated almost 24/7 if they live on their own, even in the job as well. So
So let's use that image of the foundations. So we've got our foundations. Let's talk about house. Here we are, the construction industry. What a few years it's had, and what a few years it's going to have, as we all know. We've got the foundation. There are kind of never go away skills. They're the ones that we need to look after. And David, you used the line, and I loved it, as wooden floors still rot. They still need looking after, and they need to be looked after in a certain way. So those are our soft skills. They don't go away. We must nurture them. We must give them varnish. We must give them wax. We must polish them. We must look after them. What we build on top of that is our technical skill, and that will change. Let's think about a house. You build a house, you're very happy with it, but you want to extend it. You want to build an extension, you want to reskill, you want to train. You can do that. You can then also go, right, 10 years later, 5 years later, that doesn't work for anymore, knock it down, build another one. And I think when we're coaching and when we're advising and we're working and we're talking skills, is nothing stands still. And before too long, we're going to shift this conversation into talking about how the business world responds to this skills topic. But I think as human beings, nothing stands still. Every day we are an evolved version of ourselves, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And as we look at developing these skills, I think we have to stop, don't we? And David, to you, is we have to stop, check in with who we are, check in with how we are in our skills, and then identify how we develop, don't we? And I know, that development bit is something that we talk a lot about with you, and how to advise people to develop. Particularly, let's talk about the hospitality industry. How do they develop those skills now? Because it's a different world.
Absolutely. And a world where employers don't really have a lot of time to train on the job. And that is one of the real issues. But I think it comes down to being able to identify, as we were saying earlier, Stuart's employer and Stuart himself, and then Ruth clearly identified there were transferable skills he had. Again, thinking back to yesterday, sitting in front of all those students, and no disrespect to the school, but there was an awful lot who sat there explaining how they were studying psychology and criminology and forensics. I'm thinking, that's fantastic. But the numbers of jobs in those, despite all the TV programs that would seem to indicate otherwise, are tiny, tiny, tiny. What I really do hope is that somebody's having a conversation with them saying, lovely, I'm glad you're enjoying your psychology. So let's see how psychology is used in hospitality, perhaps. When people go to a restaurant, they are likely to leave a big tip and come back. If you have a good smile on your face, that's the psychology of welcome, making people feel happy. They're likely to be comfortable if there's flowers on the table, if the temperature's just right. That's all psychology, is getting that stuff right. So encourage them to use the rote learning to think about other careers they can go and do with it. With criminology, it's about focus on detail, getting the detail right, perhaps looking really beyond the obvious at things, which is can be fantastic in problem solving or even in engineering to actually sort out what's gone wrong with something. So these are really where I think the individual needs to be encouraged to look for that, because when they go into a workplace, they may well be faced with a situation where the employer doesn't have a lot of time to tease out those transferable skills. The individual needs to be able to present them and say, I can do that, I can find this, I've got the mindset to look for those things.
I think that's brilliant. That, for me, I think there's a couple of things that you've said in there, David. The first thing, I think you're spot on. Employers at the moment, as much as they would like to develop the skills, and we had it again with a client yesterday, we would love to take this person. I just don't know how we're going to train them. We don't, because everybody feels at the moment that they're at absolute maximum capacity, even above maximum capacity, aren't they? I mean, hospitality industry, they haven't got enough staff to run the venue or the restaurant that they want and run it in the way that they want to run it. So how do they take a step back to then say, well, actually, we're going to take this person out for a little bit so that they can train the next people coming through. So I think that's the reality of where we are. And I think that's a good point to discuss further. But I think what you've just said about this comes back to the foundation. When you're learning something, you're learning with a purpose. And this is all about aspiration. And we don't want people to not reach for the stars, and they want that key job in forensics, or they want to be the financial director of wherever it may be, or an MD or a social media executive, whatever it is. Reach for the stars, but understand your core foundation of what you've learned and understand the transferability, because we're in a world that is moving at such a fast pace that you need to evolve to make sure that you are employable if you can't get that dream job. And two, you need to make it easy for a future employer to see your skill. And that is it. And that's in anybody, isn't it? Whether we're starting out or whether we're transferring into a new role, our responsibility is to make it easy for somebody else to see our transferable skill. Now, I'll go back to Stu and say, even though Stu wasn't looking at coming into recruitment, he made it easy for me because on his CV, he'd identified his transferable skills. So I could see the transferability, even though he couldn't see, he had no idea that was what was going to happen. But he did a good CV. It was clearly presented. And when we had a conversation, he was clear on what he was great at and what he wanted to do. So he made my life easier.
Yeah, and actually, Ruth, we talked a lot about that, when we felt that the market was really pinched and we had lots of people reaching out to us feeling a bit, feeling really concerned about the lack of opportunity, 18 months ago. And we talked and we kept saying, make it easy for the people who are hiring.
Yeah.
Two things, come proposing, like David's just said, I'm really good at solving problems. I'm really good at smiling at people when they're being really difficult. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm like Stu said, I'm a tinkerer. I'm quite happy to, something's not working, take it apart, have a look at it. Just share those stories, give us those scenarios. And then the other one we said was, come with that flexibility of what can I do? How can I learn? How can I help? And that hasn't gone away. And as we're talking about transferring and developing, lots of it is attitude, isn't it? So much of it is attitude. And actually then those transferable skills, and everyone says, oh, what can my transferable skills be? The majority of transferable skills are soft skills, aren't they?
They are indeed.
Yeah.
I just want to pick up that one word you said there.
Skills. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to pick up on the one word you said there, which is story. One of the adults these people had to meet yesterday was Ernie, who is a professional storyteller. So what on earth somebody who's doing maths, English and physics was sitting down, they would have got an entirely different experience talking to Ernie. But a serious point, I mean, threading things together into a story that makes sense for an employer, that's absolutely right, Charlotte. You do have to learn to tell the story. Again, it's another one of the foundations. I mean, it's just like when you're building that house, it has to have a corridor. There has to be a flow from the kitchen to the dining room to the stairs, bathroom. It all has to make sense. And I do think that is something that, once again, without putting all the pressure on schools, but we as career coaches, as individuals who can provide feedback, if we can help people to tell their story.
Absolutely.
That's really key.
So,
but adults can learn that as well, because
absolutely.
How we've probably not learned this at school, of how do you link that together so that you present it and you showcase your skills and showcase your transferable skills.
Yeah, we don't. And one of the biggest things that when coaching youngsters, we teach is when you ask, maybe you're teaching them how to interview, maybe you're just teaching them some basic communication skills. And Tally, if Tally's watching, she'll be chuckling, is to say, make your statement and give it evidence. I'm a really good team player. It's like, what does that mean? I'm a really good team player. I've been playing hockey for my school team since I was 7, blah, 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 blah. Just tell me more. You know, I'm really responsible. Okay, what does that mean? You're 12. Well, actually, you know, I've got 4 young siblings. I've always looked after them, you know, or I'm a really good listener. It's like, okay, tell me why. It's like, because I'm the one in my friendship circle that people come and share their problems with. It's like, what do you want to do with your career? Oh, I think I'd quite like to maybe go into psychology or helping people. It's like, you can tell that because that started now. Like Stuart's story of wanting, thinking of going into engineering, because that story started at a young age. Enjoying the machinery, enjoying the doing things, enjoying the learning, enjoying being around people who enjoy practical skills. That's why your job is still enjoyable now, Stu, because the people you meet are passionate about what they do. And that is something that you have enjoyed, which makes your job really enjoyable. But what do we do with businesses then? Because every newspaper you pick up at the moment, Ruth, and I'm going to direct this at you, every newspaper we pick up, everything on the news, everywhere we look, there's no, you know, we saw it this week, not enough people to come and work in the food and veg market in the UK, haven't got enough pickers. What are we going to do? We're going to have a food crisis over the summer. You know, we've got engineering businesses saying they haven't got enough. We've got slaughterhouses saying they can't find butchers. We've got logistics companies saying they can't find drivers. How do we help businesses identify these skills, identify what they already have? Because our conversation with our recruitment world is two-way, isn't it? It's with the individuals, it's with that bit, but it's also to advise these businesses. So let's start talking about the business element. Let's start talking about that skills piece. You said something really interesting when we were prepping earlier in the week. What did you say? Is there a skill shortage or is there a skills mismatch? Didn't you?
I did. And then, yeah, that was my whole thing. Skills shortage or skills mismatch. I go deeper because my conversation carried on yesterday. And then I said, is there a skills shortage or is there a labour shortage? And actually, I think for the first time that I've ever known it, I think there's both. And I think that's where the problem is. I think we've got a labour shortage of the amount of people to do the jobs. And on top of that, we've got a skills shortage, but potentially a skills mismatch of what people are looking for and what businesses need. Sorry?
Is it actually a skills mismatch or is it a cultural mismatch? Because that's where I'm finding the biggest thing is that cultural.
I think it's a perfect storm. I think we've got individuals choosing to have a different life and work a different life. So the biggest thing that we see is, and we do a lot of work with food manufacturers, is we've become a society that's a 24/7 society that expects things very, very quickly, which in turn has made the food manufacturing sector a 24/7 manufacturing sector. So rather than in the 80s, you'd work Monday to Friday and it'd be weekends off, now it's 24/7. Culturally, where we've gone to is, as families, we want to spend more time with our families. So the appeal of working on a Saturday or a Sunday is not there because people want to go and see their children play sport or take them to events or have family time. So I think culturally, we've got there is a mismatch there. I have no idea what we do with that, by the way, but this is just an observation of, as a society, we have decided that we want things quickly, but haven't really thought about, well, what the impact is on the employers. I think the skills mismatch is, I think technology is moving very, very quickly, and probably quickly than maybe we can grasp. And actually, the skills that we need today may not be needed in 2 to 5 years' time. So I think there's a challenge for businesses to think, okay, what do we need now? And what do we think we're going to need in 2 years' time? And I think that's a challenge because you're trying to deliver everything today. It goes back to the hospitality sector that we were talking about. You know, the restaurant is open today. You've got to do your covers today.
Yeah.
And, you know, from a business point of view, absolutely, strategically, we need to be thinking about the future. But on the ground today, if we don't get those covers done, we don't have an income, which means we don't have a business for the future. So I think there's a mismatch on what we can do. I think the easiest thing of what we can do, because it's only about these small percentage changes, isn't it? It's like in sport, you know, you can't change it overnight, but you can do marginal gains. And I think it was Dave Brailsford, the head of cycling, was one of the first to say this, just that 1%. So maybe the 1% change for today for employers and future employees is to be able to, for an employer to say, okay, this person has got these skills. Where are my non-negotiables? What is the stuff that to make my business work, I have to have? And then what can I train realistically? Because you don't want somebody to have a bad training experience because they'll leave anyway. So be realistic about what you can train, I think is sensible. And then from, you know, you looking for a new job as an individual, right, what are my non-negotiables of who do I want to work for? What does that look like? And what am I prepared to compromise on to learn and develop within that organization? Because it all does come down to that process, doesn't it? Identify what we've got as a business, as an individual. Look at where we can improve, look at where we develop, and then look at how we transfer those skills. But we can't change it overnight.
No.
But I think for the businesses, our default, again, you know, like with an individual is, I need to upskill, so I'll have to find an external course. They look externally. I've got to find an external course, got to, you know, something technical. And again, for a business, when a business is looking at skills, we need this skill. It is not uncommon for the default to look externally, is it? We need somebody new. But actually, again, it's that relationship internally. Who can we improve? Who have we got who, you know, is at a certain level, who potentially, they've got the core skills, they've got the foundation that we want, they've got some of the technical skill, we can improve on there too, because all of the soft skills are there and all of the mindsets there and everything is there to be able to encourage them to do that. Stu, I don't know how you know, when you're recruiting engineers, whether actually sometimes there is a pushback to a client to say, actually, can we move that person? Because it's going to be easier to recruit somebody at that level than it is at that level, and we can move that person across. Because that is our job as advisors, isn't it, when we're advising businesses? It's not just to take it to, oh, yes, you need that.
Well, yeah, quite often one of the first questions, as you've already touched on there, is have you already looked internal before you go external? Have you got someone internal that knows the company, knows the values, knows the other departments, knows the site in Spain or America already, and knows that ethos of the company already before you go? And you've got to teach them part of the job, and you've got to teach them the company as well. So there's double amounts there, rather than maybe just an element of the role. So and that could be someone, a maintenance engineer or in design, that goes into technical sales, and you think, oh yeah, but they're not sales. Yeah, but have they got the core skills? Are they empathetic? Have they got the listening skills to go into a sales role, but you don't think they're salesy? So it's looking at the other departments as well. Who's already a salesperson? Then it's looking at the core skills and some of the hard skills. Where's, if it is going to be a quick role, where's the quickest gain going to be by taking someone internal and training them? Yeah. And I suppose on the reverse of that, we've probably all had clients where they've looked for professionals close to, and 6 months later they're still looking for it. And well, if you'd have gone with that person at week 2, it was 70% there, you would have trained them by now and they'd be doing the role, but you're still looking. And that's not going to go on all roles, but yeah, a couple of months of training, they'd have been there, where 6 months later they're still looking for the same person as well. So
I think that's very valuable, Stuart. I mean, I'm going back to the hospitality example. I mean, there was this thing that's got a bit of a bad reputation now. It's the trial shift, where restaurants used to get people in, cooks, chefs, front of house people, make them work a shift. So to see if they've got that cultural match, if they've got those soft skills or indeed the technical understanding of how to carry a plate or how to make a fettuccine. Now, it got a bad name because they were trying to get it as cheap labour, free labour in many cases. When it was when there were more candidates than there were jobs, they could get away with that. But I do think, certainly in specifically internally, what's the cost of getting somebody out of engineering and putting him into sales for a little bit? What's the loss? Because he's certainly got the understanding of the business. He's more than halfway there and understanding what's needed in that role. And if we can develop those internal coaches who can actually monitor, assess, and just tweak it, you're absolutely right. You can convert somebody from one important role to another important role and backfill with some of these great apprentices that I met yesterday. There's hundreds of them at Mighton School, folks. Go and hire them all.
There you go.
Yeah. It is so interesting that, though. What a clever way of upskilling your business, both soft skills and hard skills there, because you said a word there that just makes everything for me just go, woo, is mentors. You're creating mentors within your business. If we can move people across and put somebody else in that role, you've got a buddy straight away. You've got somebody who's done that role. You've got somebody who's been successful at that role to help that person. Likewise, the person who's moved into that role, there will be somebody around them. So you're suddenly creating a community in an environment in the business where technical skills are encouraged and there is growth, but the soft skills are given the time as well. Because that mentoring, that collaboration, the patience, all the stuff you need, and I'm giggling, all the stuff you need when you've got to babysit somebody. But it is such a good skill to have, isn't it?
Yeah.
And from how do we keep employees engaged? When we talk about employee engagement, that retention bit, it's about that variety. And variety doesn't necessarily mean variety of technical task and operational task. It means variety across the board. Whether that is one day mentoring, whether that one day is, doing some training, whether it is learning a new technical skill, whether it is doing the mundane, it has got to be that variety.
Absolutely. But there's some HR man traps here that are going to get in the way of this. I mean, I'll give you 3 of them. There's job descriptions. It's not in my job description to do that. I've got to focus on getting my own KPIs done. There is the head count, and then there is the organogram that will get in the way of this variety of getting people to work side by side or to encourage and mentor people on. So we do have to encourage from the organisation some little more advanced and flexible thinking if they're to take advantage of these opportunities.
What I quite like, though, about it is, we talked about, and I'm conscious of time, but I'm also conscious of kind of making sure that we're covering things. We talked about how quickly the market's moving. We've talked about that flexibility. We've talked about how there are jobs here today that won't necessarily be here tomorrow. We have a responsibility as employers, as business owners, as colleagues, as friends, as family, whatever it is, to bring people up, to encourage them to get better. And as a business, we can encourage those people to gain more and more and more skill, whether that's technical or not. We are helping their transferable skills, which then means if they leave, they're going to go to another business better. It isn't actually, I know it's awful, but isn't actually that our aim as employers to make our employees better, whether they stay within the business or whether they take that elsewhere? And it is a discussion point. And Ruth, to you, I know. Yeah.
I think, and I think that can be quite emotional, because you do want everybody to be better. I would say I'd like to think that everybody that's employing people and working with people wants the best and wants to be the best and wants their teams to be the best. And sometimes things do happen. I hear great stories of, people that have been their apprentices and they've gone off and done brilliant things elsewhere. And, it is hard. And we've had it within our organisation. We had a fabulous apprentice. She was absolutely brilliant, high level of attention to detail. And what's she doing now? Forensics in the police. Now I'm split, because part of me is, she's done brilliant. Stu will agree. It's the right job.
Yes,
for her. Absolutely the right job for her. But on the other side of things, it doesn't work for us anymore.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get great people, and she was great, but it wasn't right for the actual. She couldn't grow with us. She can grow within this is the second role I think that she's got within the police now. So I think it's hard, Charlotte. And I look at our bigger businesses that we're working with, and it's tough. It's really tough for them, because they've got headcount gaps. They need to get products out of the door. They've got high costs, and yeah, it's hard. It is hard, but I come back to, because I think sometimes when we do these sessions, I feel like when we're saying what our thoughts are and our practical tips, it sounds so easy, and I don't want it to ever become a flippant, oh, just do this and it'll be fine. Because it is really hard. Changing your career is really hard. Finding the right, a move is hard. Employing people and getting that fit is hard. And for me, I would just go back to those marginal gains. I think there's been some really, David's examples of trial shifts. For me, that is a no-brainer. Get somebody to come in externally and come in and spend a day with you. Yeah. Get them to feel it. Maybe have an open day. I mean, it's obviously a bit difficult if you're working for another company and you don't want people to see that, there's a confidentiality, and there's always going to be barriers. But find what's right for your organisation and do a little marginal gain. If you're trying to recruit engineers, maybe we've talked about mentors. Maybe a mentor could go to an apprenticeship college and go and sit with the engineers just like a day a month, the new engineers coming through, and mentor that way. But it is hard, Charlotte. I think for me, being in recruitment since the early 90s and seeing what I've seen, I don't think I've ever experienced my customers under so much pressure.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And trying to share that and solve it. And what did you say earlier? You were like, I don't know the answer to that question. The amount of times I've said, let me look in my crystal ball, or I don't know, or I'll polish off my wand, or all these things, because we are feeling it too. And today was a discussion and a reflection. They're always reflections, just to say, we are aware of these things. Let's talk about it. If you want to carry on with these discussions at any point, reach out to any of us, please do. Be Career Confident will be back in a month. And actually, I think lots of these decision making and everything, whenever we make a decision, whether a business or a person, it's got to be well informed, hasn't it? It's got to be done. And as Ruth said, it's not just a flippant, oh yeah, that's fine, it'll be easy. It's not. You have to make sure you are well informed with your decision making. So in response to that, we have book club next month, where Gary Simpson and Ruth and I will be talking about books that we've read, writers, authors, whatever it is that we feel has been particularly influential within our work, within the world of HR, within the world of kind of human resources, within the world of us as humans, how we evolve, how we get better, how we improve. And that will be, that there will be different things there. We always chuckle because Gary is the reader.
A book a week. He's a book a week, man.
He's a book a week man. I support him by buying the books and starting them and doing a pretty good job of maybe getting through them, but really slowly. And Ruth is our avid supporter, 100% going, guys, have you read any interesting books? I'm so keen to hear about them.
I just nick all of the ideas because I just snippets. I'm really excited because I learn so much, and then I might buy the book and I might read more about that chapter. But yeah, great insights into getting things done or improving. Yeah, highly recommend joining us. I'm looking forward to it because I'm going to learn so much.
Just worry about bank balance afterwards when Gary's list of recommendations gets longer and longer. Right, it leaves me to say an enormous thank you, David, Stu. Such a pleasure as always. Your insight is so fantastic. David, I love your stories. I love, how you're at the forefront with these youngsters. and the hospitality industry at the moment is just, it's just evolving so quickly. And Stu, thank you for sharing your story. That's been really helpful today.
That's all right, no problem.
Huge benefit and huge insight. And, the engineering sector, as we know, is one that's definitely feeling the brunt of this storm. And Ruth, as always, lovely, just lovely. Great to see you all. Leaves me to say goodbye. See you on the 5th of May. Take care.
See you later.
Mate, thank you very much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Right.
Bye.